This is like 2019 no thank you tier. Like when he was always making videos in the fucking kitchen, when he always had shit going on in the kitchen. This is literally exactly the same as that. You remember this? He'd be cutting shit and then he'd be like, "Oh, oh, nihilism, postmodernism, Michel Houellebecq, Michael Foucault, blah blah blah." And then he would do that, and then he would have a YouTube video, and it would look exactly like this. It would look identical to this, and it would be a YouTube video on youtube.com, no thank you. That shit's crazy. I've been awake for like 3 days. And honestly, I've never felt better in I was gonna say my entire life, but that's a little bit of a stretch. I haven't felt better in a long time. I have not. I have not. What I've been realizing, both intuitively and intellectually, is basically that all I've been looking for in life, and also now, it's remained the same, but basically all I've ever been looking for is aesthetics. I've been pursuing aesthetics, and I've been pursuing a life where I have autonomy over the technology that I use, and am not forced into aesthetically bad forms of technology. Because, I mean, we can talk about the, like, moral component to, like, copyleft or GNU shit, and I mean, all that's good, right? Like, I'm not saying any of that stuff is bad, but, like, I mean, really, at the end of the day, the real reason a lot of this stuff is good is because having more control over the way you use the way you use technology means that you have greater control over the aesthetics of the technology you use, and the better the resource management is. Obviously, the older the technology you can use is, so the more aesthetically pleasing it can be in that sense, right? That's the whole idea. And so, what I've been realizing is I've been off the beat and path, because literally, I was stuck in the most soulless, like, crushing, adverse environment that I could have been in, and I've been slowly, like, dragging myself, kicking and screaming, to a better life. And in the process of doing that, what I've realized is that I literally just lost the soul. Like, all of the soul in my life went away, and now I'm getting the soul back. I'm getting a more soulful existence. I'm starting to fulfill a more soulful existence, because I'm now in an environment that facilitates the ability to think, and gives me time to think, where I don't have all this extraneous external noise clouding my headspace and you know, changing, making it to where I can't see the full picture. I couldn't see the full picture before, but I was blind, and now I see. Now I see the truth. The truth is that I've just been looking for aesthetics the whole time. And what I want to do is surround myself with good technology, make new videos, and engage with subjects of my own interest, and go places and make things, and be with people who, you know, I can feel in some way facilitate that kind of creative energy, right? We love what's happening. There's so many things. There's so many things to this life and in this world that are beautiful. And what maybe the reason I've been awake for 3 days is because I just I'm just coming to understand every little facet of how much there is to this world, you know? Like I try to lay down. I try to lay down, and I the last several nights I've just laid down for like 12 hours. I've laid down for like 12 hours, and I end up getting this like awake dream stuff where like I'm awake and I have a dream, and I end up having a waking dream, and it's the most vivid imagery I've ever seen. And what I've been seeing is that there is truth, there is truth in that which we can feel from the visual and auditory experience. The dynamicism, the dynamic between those two things, what they create, the way they coalesce together, the way what I create in these videos and with my writing, that's what it's all about. It's all about doing things that have soul, having the least shallow relationship with everything and all that. I think I said something. I think I'm realizing how little people tend to understand about themselves, because there's an image people have in their head of themselves as a quote unquote good person, and they value this a lot. They put a lot of stock on this idea of them as a good person. Now, I don't, not particularly at all. What I really value is this idea of people being an honest person. That to me, and also self-awareness, but those two things to me are the most important. And that kind of makes people's heads spins when I try to sit down and tell them about it, because they're so used to people living in a moralistic framework that they literally can't comprehend it. It's like it goes in one ear and comes out the other. And so I try to ask people to adapt their behavior along these lines for me, and even for the ones who are smart enough to adapt in some time, there's always this lingering idea in the back of their head of like what's appropriate or what they should do for the vast majority of people who I guess I'll just say been traumatized by into this framework of like, you have to be a good person, you have to be a good person. I mean, what even is a good person? I seem to have a very different idea about that than most people. Always have, always will, probably. People put so much stock into these things that just literally don't matter, you know? When I would rather people just tell me point blank the truth every single time, and then you try to level with them on this, and then they go, well, you say that, but it's like, yeah, I do say that. I say that because I've never said anything opposite to that, and you know, everything about my behavior would indicate to you that that this is true, that this has been a consistency. So why don't you adhere to that? And it's like, well, there's this fundamental trauma they're unwilling to address. So then, you know, it suddenly becomes a problem with me, right? And I think that this lack of character in general tends to stem from over socialization, or you know, socialization of a specific type. Like, obviously, if you're surrounded by people who tend to be, you know, pretty controlling, or gaslight you, or are manipulative in some way, they want to make you feel bad for every single thing you say, and they try to force you to manage your language. I can't fucking stand people like that. Unfortunately, it's a large amount of the population, and I try to provide this outlet for people to show them, hey, you don't have to be like that around me. Because the thing I'm most offended by is that kind of micromanaging of one's own behaviors, one's own speech. Um, and I think anyone who makes you feel like you have to think like that or feel like that, it is a bad person. Um, is antithetical to moral values, right? They're the bad people. But they want to make you think that you're a good person by adhering to their abusive, frameworks. I mean, this is what um, cancellation is about. This is what social justice warriors and what are they what are the other folks called? What do they call themselves? Um, the woke mob, whatever you want to call them. Woke scolds. That's the one, right? Um, I've had a negative experience with these people because, you know, I'm pretty depressed myself. And like I understand that there comes a point when people just kind of give out, like they've given all they can give and they can't really give anymore. They need time. That's a human thing. And I've met some of these people who don't know when to take time for themselves in an honest way. Like, they need time for themselves, but they won't just say it, like, oh, hey, I need some time. Instead, they say the exact opposite. They'll say, oh, let me know whenever you need me, anytime, anywhere, always, every moment of the day, blah, blah, blah. And, I'll always be thinking, I mean, most people wouldn't, want to hear if I got some kind of problem, because I always got problems. I mean, most people wouldn't want to hear about that all the time, so are you sure about that? There was always this kind of resistance on my part. You sure about that? You sure about that? And then, eventually I hear it so many times from these spineless cowards who can't stand up for themselves. It's like, well, okay, I'll say it, whenever. And then I say it. I'm put into that position where I'm made to feel comfortable saying it. And then what do you know? Um, there's some kind of obfuscation or some kind of lie, and they end up giving too much of themselves, and then without ever giving any indication, ever telling me, ever giving any sign, being like, hey, bro, I need some time for myself, without ever doing anything like that, they put the onus on me and then are like, hey, you did this to me. You, you fucking da da da, why'd you do that? Making me always be there. And it's like, well, I didn't make you always be there. You offered up again and again. I kept asking, hey, are you sure you're all right with all this? Because I know for a lot of people this would be a little too much. Now they say the opposite again and again, and it's like, well, okay, if you're sure. And then it's like, all of a sudden, when you overestimated yourself, when you've had too much, now it's my fault. You signed up for this, not me. And now you don't want to take personal responsibility because what? Because I'm going through a lot, and I took you up on an offer you gave me. It's not really an offer, if that's how it works. No, you don't. You're not really making decisions informed based on your experience with yourself or a real understanding of yourself. You're making decisions based on who you'd like to be. And I'm not about who you'd like to be, I'm about who you are. So tell me point blank when it seems like it's getting to be a bit too much. Seems like it is too much. It's not that hard. You know, no good friend is ever gonna grill your shit for saying, "Hey, I need some time." No good friend is ever gonna grill your shit for giving your honest opinion or saying what you really think. Because at the end of the day, I mean, that's all you can really do. I mean, what else can you do other than give your honest opinion? If you get offended by that, it's like, well, how do you even interface with the real world? You're surrounded by opinions that disagree with you. Do you just freak out every time, you know? Sounds pretty miserable to me. It's like people are way too obsessed with trying to micromanage other people's reactions to things when, you know, in reality, it's like all we can really do is our best. And I think the starting point, the way you start, is to just to be honest. Honesty is always the best policy, you know, even if sometimes it hurts in the short term, it's like that short term pain is always going to contribute to some kind of long term health, you know? And you need to be thinking about the long term with people, especially if you care about them. Of course, you're going to be thinking about the long term, right? If you actually care about them. But if you're primarily self interested, if you only care about yourself, you're going to always be avoiding that short term discomfort that it causes for you to be honest, and the way that it damages your self conception, or the way that it might, in the short term, momentarily damage the other person. It's like a good friend pulls you aside and they tell you the truth. They tell you the truth because you need to know the truth to survive in this world. You can't have a sugar coated version of reality. You need the truth, you know. Um, and that's what a good friend gives you. Now, a bad friend, they they don't tell you the truth. They obfuscate, and they do it to protect themselves rather than to protect you. They might have the delusion that they're protecting you, but really they're protecting themselves. They're only protecting you in the short term, which is actually damaging you in the long term. Which is why this whole, you know, politically correct culture has just gotten out of hand. It's just gotten out of hand because we've created this environment where, you know, people think they're good people because they're micromanaging, you know, their speech and the reactions that stem from it. You know, I think social media has played a huge role in this because the phenomenon called over socialization, people putting way too much stock on other people's reactions, like obsessing over other people's reactions because they socialize way too much. They don't have that time where they can just, you know, sit alone in a room away from their phone, not always checking to see when someone's gonna like a post they've made, or how someone sees them. They just are content with themselves, thinking to themselves. Now, this has created an environment where people are obsessed. They're obsessed with everything they do, think, or say, the way they look. And it's like people's initial reactions don't really matter that much. You know, speak as though you're someone worthy of being spoken to. If people reject that, then go to people who don't. Maybe they don't deserve you if that's how they react. Maybe they weren't ready to hear the kind of things you have to say, or maybe you're wrong. And that's another part of the equation you always have to be open to, which is part of why it's so important to talk to people who have other perspectives in the first place. This world has just gotten off the rails. I never before have I seen, with each passing year, people less and less and less able to take a joke, or to handle another opinion, or to engage in civil conversation, take constructive criticism. It's just never ending, really. there's a crisis of honesty ongoing in this current, English speaking climate that obviously that I'm used to as someone who can't speak any other language. I don't know what it's like overseas or in any other country, but wow. It sure is a mess here, it seems like. People are losing their heads left and right. And that is, if we're to talk about the political side of this, a left and right issue. SJWs and culture warriors. It's the same shit.